Hello and welcome to my first tutorial for 2021. Today we're going to cover simple HDRI creation in Blender. So first we're going to set up our scene, and if we head over to the scene, we want to change our file format to Radiance HDRI. Then we want to change our resolution to 5000 by 2500. You can really change it to any resolution you want. You just want a 2 to 1 ratio, and then we are going to create two cameras. I have gone ahead and created these. So the first camera is going to be right here in the center, and that is our HDRI render camera, which is going to be in a panoramic equirectangular mode. And then our light setup is a regular perspective camera that we're going to use for setting up our HDRI patterns and lightings. So today we're going to cover a few different types of HDRIs: simple black and white, then some kind of light white HDRI, and a color HDRI. So up here you're going to see the render results. That's going to be our HDRI. So for example, here you'll see it's a 2 to 1 ratio image, and there you can see all the light sources. Now for this to work, you have to use emission shaders and not Blender light objects. And the reason for this is light objects, although they do show up in reflections and give light data, they do not render as shapes. And for HDRs to work, you will need these shapes, as that is how you can control the light amount. So that I have a better understanding of what kind of lights I'm working with, I have gone ahead and imported some objects from Sketchfab. There's a very handy Sketchfab add-on that lets you import directly into Blender, and all the materials get placed in. And so I have here two different object setups: some shoes and some baked goods. Let's just take these and put them a little bit down like this. Now I'm going to be working with two main windows. One is a rendered view that is going to be restricted to only the camera view, and the other is going to be a regular 3D scene where I can move around. In our world setting, I have a HDRI setup and then a blank background. This one was generated through the plugin Easy HDRI, which I use to manage all my HDRIs. So we're going to start creating our first HDRI. So plug in this empty background with no light data, and since I'm not using any light objects, you can only see the silhouette of the object currently. I'm also going to show the background, so now it's all black. So this very first light setup, we are going to create a simple top light with a little bit of bottom light from a gray plane. So create our first top light, create an empty plane, scale it up, and add a new emissions shader. So here we go, and we've got our first light. So position it how you want, scale it depending on how large you want it, and this is the scale will basically just determine on how much side light your objects are getting. So we want to have a decent top light, and then create a second plane. This time we're using the principled shader. I'm going to turn down the specularity, scale that up, and this is going to be our floor here. So if we were to be rendering this now, the product instead of HDRI, this is the kind of bounce light I would want for it. But since we're creating an HDRI, I'm going to drop this down a little bit. That. And drop that specularity down even more. And now, before we go to render, we are going to switch over to our second camera, which is the HDR render. And for this, I use a plugin called Stored Views that lets me quickly switch between two cameras. So here, HDRI render, and you will see now we are looking at a perfectly spherical HDRI image. Now I have turned off the rendering for both of my products. So when I go to hit render, so there we go, we have our first HDRI, and so now we go to saving as, and I'm going to save these in my HDRI folder, and let's do tutorial 1 HDRI save. So let's go, and now we can go ahead and test our HDR. So let's switch up to the light setup and go back to HDRIs, and I'm going to open the first one. So now we're looking at the HDR. We move around, you can see there's our top plane. Now it's much larger than it was before because it's, of course, it's an HDRI, and there's our bottom plane, and these two are giving us the light data we want. Now we can move on to our next HDRI. This time let's create some studio light shapes. So let's create mesh circle. Let's drop that to 8. Fill that in. Now, a very common studio light setup will be one light source on top, and then we have another one to the side, a little bit front, and a third one over here. So the top one we're going to crank to, let's say, about 5. Then this one we're going to crank to about 3. And this one to about a 2. So then we go again back to our HDR render, hit render. And this time, as you see, I don't have a floor plane on this one, so it renders much faster, but I made a mistake. I had accidentally enabled my leather shoes. So let's try that again. So now we go to a render, and you'll see that it renders much faster as there is only emission shaders. Save this as 2. Then let's move on to some patterned lights. And let's create a new circle. 2. Scale that up. For this one, I'm going to create 2 materials. One is black, and the other one is an emission. Then I'll go ahead and select every other ring, assign it. So now you'll see we have a pattern one, we're gonna tilt this here, that, and we're gonna change the material on these shoes just for a moment so you can see the effect better. So let's open the roughness. There. If this was a glossy texture, now you have these ring-shaped patterns. Let's crank that up to like a 5. And let's just add a little bit of light to the other side. Feel light. There. So then we're gonna go to Hdri render and hit render once more. Let's cancel that. We want to up the resolution on this ring light by quite a bit so that we get a smooth light and no ridges. So I'm gonna subdivide that and let's try again. Yes, much better. And then we save this one also. Okay, now we are going to switch to one final black and white one, and this is going to be a cube. Then we're going to open the front, remove this plane. And for this one, we have, again, two materials. This is going to be a small softbox that you would often use for food photography. So let's switch over to light setup. Let's just bring that up. And then go to rendered. So the first one we keep as white. Then we're going to take the 3 different sides, and these ones are going to be an emission. If we go to Hdri render, this is what you should see. There, let's save that as tutorial 4. Now for the final one, we're gonna do some colored ones. So here we go. We got our and then we're gonna add a blue light over here. So pink and blue. Let's make this a deep blue. And when you have what you're looking for, then you hit render again. And then we can switch over to the HDRI, open up that HDRI, then delete all of our light sources. And there you have it. You have your colored HDRI. Now some of the other ones that I'm going to include over on Gumroad for tutorial files is, let's see, we have this neon lights one. When we have this ring light one, this two-sided light with a top light. But thank you for joining me on this first tutorial of 2021, and hopefully this will help you create some simple studio HDRIs so you don't have to go out and buy any. See you next time.